Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Career Choice Series webinar on cybersecurity law. The Career Choice Series is designed to give law students, young lawyers, and transitioning attorneys a general overview of a practice area and ways to position yourself to get there. The Career Choice Series is brought to you by the ABA Career Center, Law Student Division, and Young Lawyers Division. The Young Lawyers Division is here to help new lawyers navigate the early years of their career and law students prepare for life after law school. The Law Student Division offers premium benefits, which includes access and savings for Quimby.com, discounts on bar review programs, up to $50 off West Academic Casebooks, and a legal ethics bundle that includes a free Model Rules of Professional Conduct ebook. Upgrade to premium for $25 at abaforlawstudents.com/gopremium. The ABA Career Center offers both career development resources and a job board for law students and legal professionals across all disciplines and career stages. Today, we are excited to have Dan Binstock, one of our Career Center board members, moderating the program. Dan is a partner with Garrison and Sisson, a Washington, D.C. legal recruiting firm, and he's the author of The Attorney's Guide to Using or Not Using Legal Recruiters, Answers to Important Questions Most Attorneys Don't Know How to Ask but Should. With that being said, we will let Dan take over, and we'll get to meeting our panelists today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. And let's go to the next slide. And the two great panelists that we have today can tell us a brief sketch of their background so that everyone knows where they're coming from. Let's start with Linn.
Hi, everyone. This is Linn Freedman. I head the privacy and cybersecurity team at Robinson & Cole, which is a big law firm. And I've been involved in privacy and cybersecurity since 1998, and I'm an adjunct professor at Brown University in the Executive Masters of Cybersecurity program, as well as I teach at Roger Williams Law School, privacy law at the law school.
Great, thank you. And Tracey?
Hi, everyone. This is Tracey Scraba. I am the Chief Privacy Officer at CVS Health. Previous to being the Chief Privacy Officer at CVS Health, I was the Chief Privacy Officer at Aetna. For those of you who don't know, Aetna was recently acquired by CVS. Therefore, I made the transition just a couple of months ago into the role at CVS. Before that, I was in the Aetna Law Department for about 11 years and held various different roles within the law department, and actually started my legal career at Robinson & Cole, coincidentally, where Linn is now. So I spent a few years there as a health law associate in their health law group.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, both of you, for being here today, and you seem to have very impressive backgrounds, obviously. And so let's get started with the next slide, which is, what is cybersecurity law? Who would like to start first?
I'm happy to start. This is Linn. So, as I said before, I've been in this area for a long time, before the word cybersecurity probably even existed. And so, back in the day, we used to call this area of law data privacy and security. And then cybersecurity became kind of a well-known word for a broad scope of things relating to data. And what I always like, I'm looking at the demographics of the folks on the phone, and what I always like to say, that the cool thing about this area of law is that it didn't exist when I graduated from law school, and it didn't exist for many, many years, and now it's a very robust area. But there's a dearth of people that know the law, that know this area of law. So when I define what is cybersecurity law in so far as what we do every day, it's looking at data. It's looking at not only data involving personal information, but involving all information, the risk around data, and the laws and regulations around both privacy and security when you're accessing, using, and disclosing data. So that's the way I would define cybersecurity law.
Great. How about you, Tracey?
Yeah, thank you. And it's interesting that Lynn ended where I was going to start, which was the intersection of privacy and security. I think there's two concentric circles really where if you look at how do you define cybersecurity law, in my mind, you can't describe or define cybersecurity law without also including privacy there. And I would agree that it's really around the collection of data as well as the use and disclosure of data, how to protect that data. And it probably goes without saying that you can't have privacy if you don't have security. Interestingly enough, the hat that I wear as an in-house chief privacy officer, I, as well as all of the lawyers within the privacy office here at CVS Health, act as the lawyers for our information security team here at Aetna and at CVS Health. So we are wearing two hats all of the time, constantly thinking about the privacy laws along with the new cybersecurity regulations that are proliferating every day. There are more and more specific regulations related to the security of information. We've had HIPAA security rule for some time now, but now more and more states are starting to pass very specific laws on cybersecurity. So I would say in order to define cybersecurity law, from my perspective, it's looking at it as a combination of both privacy laws along with security, and you can't really have one without the other.
And I couldn't sorry, can I come back? I couldn't agree more. And although that both of us have a background in privacy law, I think, Tracey, you'd agree with me that you can't go into cybersecurity law solely on the privacy side because of all the state and federal laws and regulations that are coming out. As Tracey said, many of them have to do with data security, what measures, technological, administrative, and operational measures you have to have in place to protect the data, the confidentiality of the data. So I couldn't agree with Tracey more that when you're talking about cybersecurity law, it has to be privacy and security together. You can't have one without the other. And if you're thinking about going into this area of law, you're gonna have to be exposed to some of the technical things around securing data more than just going into the privacy law side of things.
Is it accurate? And I'm sorry. Were you going to continue, or did you have something?
I was going to say, this is Tracey. I was going to say that I have two lawyers on my team that spend a lot of their time negotiating what people refer to as data security agreements. So they come to the lawyers because it's an agreement that needs to be negotiated, but a large majority of the provisions in those agreements are around things like encryption or audit logs and all of the technical things that the lawyers that are practicing in this area need to understand. So knowing the technical pieces is really important. And I know later we're going to talk about a day in the life of, and it can be a little. Sometimes I find that it can be a little scary for lawyers to think that all of a sudden they're going to also have to be technologists. But in order to be an effective cybersecurity attorney, that is absolutely something that you need to also learn. And you get exposed to it enough where you can pick it up in practice. But they're oftentimes negotiating very technical provisions in a legal contract. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just, thank you. That's very helpful. And I think kind of summarizing, is it safe to say that the difference between cybersecurity and privacy is cybersecurity is really about guarding and protecting from unauthorized access, where data privacy is more about what you do with the information once you have it and not using it in an improper way? Is that sort of a very shorthand way that kind of distinguishes the two?
I think so.
I'm going to quibble a little. Sorry, we got to make this exciting. It's right after lunch. I don't think that you can separate privacy from security. when you talk about privacy laws, you're talking about giving individuals particular rights around their data, access and accounting, and finding out who has disclosed it, finding out how people are actually using it. That would be more on the privacy side. There's laws around what you have to do on the privacy side, but those same laws all have security measures that you have to use to protect that data. And I would also say that cybersecurity law is not just privacy and security, but it has blended into technology, into intellectual property, employee theft, and other. It bleeds into so many different things. So when I started in this area of law, you could be a generalist, and now I would say, and what I say to my students is, you have to specialize if you're going to go into this area of law. You can't really be a generalist because the laws are they're rapidly expanding, and they're not just privacy laws anymore. They all have security components to them.
Okay, yes, and that goes to the earlier point that they really are concentric circles where there is a lot of overlap. So, Lexi and Emily, let's skip the next slide and start with a day in the life in terms of what you do in your average day and, all the different hats that you wear. And let's have each of you speak for, 60 to 90 seconds on that.
Sure, I can start. This is Tracey. I have a long laundry list, so I'll try to keep it short because the day in the life of a chief privacy officer can be many things. Certainly, it can be crisis management. So a lot of people, when they think of privacy and security, think of privacy breaches. Unfortunately, that is something that happens. It doesn't happen every day, thank goodness, but certainly crisis management on a regular basis, meaning looking at the incident, figuring out, what needs to be done very quickly, making very quick decisions. And there's no other way to describe it other than crisis management. Working with, obviously, our information security group on multiple items every single day, including things like risk assessments, understanding different standards that they are, control standards that they are required to comply with. So we work daily with our information security colleagues. Managing third-party risk is another big piece of what we do every day. So many companies use a very large volume of third-party vendors to perform a lot of services on that company's behalf. And so that remains a large risk in the cyber and privacy space that multiple companies are dealing with every day to make sure that they're doing what I would call security diligence on their third parties to ensure that the third parties are protecting and using data appropriately. Two other things I'll mention quickly, or three, I suppose, is this is the first legal role where I find myself dealing with forensics firms. And I remember when I first started in this space, I thought, well, why on earth would I be working with forensics? And we are tapped into, as the Lawyers for Cybersecurity, to participate in what is called red team events, which is ethical hacking to test your own systems to see if people can find the vulnerabilities. You hire actual forensics firms to see if they can find vulnerabilities in your system, and we find ourselves having to privilege those reports. So I find myself being a quasi litigator in some cases where I'm making sure that things are privileged, which is typically what the litigation department would do, as opposed to the cyber and privacy lawyers. But we find ourselves privileging a lot of documents and making sure that any of those forensics reports are not discoverable, or at least that's our goal. And I would say we deal a lot with, Linn mentioned employees, bad employees and employee relations. We deal with a lot with investigative services. So if we have an employee who improperly accesses information or improperly uses information, the cybersecurity and privacy lawyers work with our internal investigative services on a regular basis on their investigations. And then lastly, and Linn already mentioned it, tracking the laws and the what I'll call the traditional lawyering of helping the business or the clients interpret the new regulations and making sure that they are implementing the regulations to ensure compliance.
Thank you, Tracey. I'm going to actually ask one question to combine the next question because I think it could be useful. Is instead of what do you sort of love or hate about the job, because it sounds like you both really, really enjoy the job. What types of people are happiest in this area, and what types of people seem to struggle? And I'll ask both of you this, but since you just spoke, why don't we get your thoughts, Tracey, and then Linn, you can share some of that as well in terms of the day in your life and what types of people do best and versus those that struggle.
Sure. So I think the people who do best in this job, going back to the crisis management, are people who can stay level-headed and are able, again, to make really quick decisions. I think in order to be successful in this type of role, you have to be comfortable with the crisis management piece. I've seen other of my colleagues who are really great technical lawyers, but they are unable to really handle that crisis management piece of it. I think that really does help tremendously, as well as executive presence. So as the Chief Privacy Officer of a large company, I find myself in front of the board of directors as well as the audit committee pretty often, for better or for worse. And so I think people in this role will thrive if they are able to have that executive presence and able to present at that level.
Yeah, probably ensuring confidence in people who are in a very panicked state when something happens.
Yes, as being managed correctly.
Yes, exactly. And thank you. So, Linn, how about a little bit briefly on a typical day for you and what types of people, if it differs from what Tracey said in terms of people do best and those that struggle?
Sure. Just so for the folks on the phone, Tracey is the in-house counsel and she's assisting her business units with data privacy and cybersecurity. I am outside counsel to folks like Tracey and lots of other companies in all industries where we assist with compliance and navigating this patchwork of state and federal laws that don't have in-house counsel that are able to do that for them. So I represent industries, every size industry, every area that you can possibly even think of. And what we do the same types of things for our clients where I don't like to do it, but we end up doing a lot of security incidents and data breach response and mitigation. So I as well work with vendors that assist with forensic investigations, with data breach notification. On top of that, I'm a former regulator, and so I do a lot of enforcement actions and litigation, not only for data breaches, but people who are suing as a result of their information being collected, accessed, used, and disclosed in an unauthorized manner. I also do quite a bit of due diligence around mergers and acquisitions because every company now has data, and every company has the risk of a security incident. So I tend to do a lot of review of due diligence and provide questions for due diligence around a company or a target company's data. We obviously do a lot of contracting, a ton of contracting. And what I like to do the best is I like to sit down with clients, and I'm doing this more and more. I like to sit down with clients and talk to them about their collection of data and data ethics. So data has become a risk to companies, and more companies are now saying to their business units, don't just grab all the data. We need to really figure out why we're using it. And I like to talk about data ethics and strategy around risk with respect to data. So that's, and obviously I do a lot of board education and C-suite education, but the last thing is I totally agree with Tracey that to be in this space, I always tell people you can't have a weak stomach. You got to have a strong stomach on multiple levels. You're getting when a company has a security incident or a data breach, or a ransomware, like a ransomware attack brings a small to mid-sized company to its knees. And they are in crisis mode and they're trying to stay alive. And you're dealing with that client at their most vulnerable time. And it's an awful scenario. And you have to have confidence and you have to be able to navigate and help hold their hand through this very traumatic event. And so being able to do that with confidence and knowing exactly what to do and the steps to take in a ransomware incident is very important. So you need to have confidence. You need to have a strong stomach. You need to work hard. I mean, I get calls and texts and 24/7. You have to be able to drop everything when you get a data breach or a security incident. And then I would say you have to be able to provide advice without sending a 10-page memo to your client. I get calls all day from clients. Lynn, our marketing department wants to do this. Can we do this? You have to be able to say yes, because that marketing department is developing an app. They want to be able to get that app out into the public, and you want to be able to say yes, no, maybe. These are the things that you've got to consider. You've got to be able to be comfortable giving advice. That's why you need to know the law and you need to know what the requirements are. You have to be able to give advice quickly, succinctly, confidently, and without a 10-page memo.
And because a lot of this is still developing law, there's no real clear guidance, and you need to be able to sometimes just make the most educated guess on, or not guess, but informed decision without having the security of well-established law or precedent.
Yeah, there's more and more law, but I will say that when you're in this space long enough, you can pretty much predict what the regulators are looking at, what Congress is looking at, what laws are going to come down the pike. You watch the most stringent laws, and that's what you use as your benchmark. But you can almost predict things that are happening and before they're happening, and you can guide your clients in that manner. And I think that's more than a lot of other areas of law.
Great. Well, let's turn to, if you both were either law students or looking to get into this area, if you were a little more experienced, what are the one or two key things that you would do to break into this area? Whether it's getting, certification as a certified information privacy professional. Is that what it is, CIPP? I hope I'm saying that right. But what would you be doing to break into this field?
Yeah, so this is Tracey. I'll start. I have a saying that I like to share with students and others that are newer to any area. And what I would recommend first and foremost is lead with yes. And so if I think about the way in which I got here, if you had asked me, I've been doing privacy now for about 7 years. If you had asked me prior to that whether or not I was going to be doing privacy and cyber law, I'm not sure I would have predicted this. But what I've done is I have taken opportunities that have come to me and lead with yes and kind of figure it out later. And what it has done for me is where I started, really where my privacy career started and cybersecurity career started, was with behavioral health, which people sometimes scratch their head and think, well, how did that happen? And I was the behavioral health lawyer at Aetna, and when privacy and cyber started to, for all intents and purposes, really explode, the external environment started to change, and instead of being traditional privacy lawyers, people were starting to look at cyber more closely. As Lynn described, it wasn't even something that existed when I graduated law school either. As the behavioral health lawyer, there are a lot of laws that address behavioral health and substance abuse conditions around keeping that information confidential and private. And so when there was an opportunity to move into privacy and cyber, I got tapped on the shoulder and someone said to me, you know a lot about privacy laws because you are the behavioral health lawyer. Do you want to be the privacy and security lawyer? And I didn't know what it entailed at the time, but I said yes. And from there, it just completely catapulted my career and was a new cutting edge type of subject matter. It still continues to be, in my mind, pretty cutting edge. So I do think that getting out to different, to the extent you're able, getting out to different conferences, attending webinars like you are today, and learning as much as you can about the subject area really does help. I do agree with Linn that this is an area where you really have to be a specialist. So to the extent it does interest you, I think this is one of the areas of law where doing as much as you can to learn about the different trends in not only cybersecurity, but privacy would benefit you. And then the other thing is there are some pretty well-known bloggers and things. Brian Krebs is one of them, where you can, go onto their websites and learn what is coming at you from what is going to be trending, if you will, in cybersecurity. And oftentimes those bloggers know before any of the businesses or Linn's clients know what is going to be happening next in this area. So I do think certifications help, although I will say that most people now have those certifications. So looking for something to really differentiate you would be to understand and start learning more of the technical side. I don't know, Linn may have some better insight here, having worked more closely with students. But I think, lawyers, to differentiate yourself as a cyber lawyer, learning and getting comfortable with that technical side by following the cyber and technical blogs and things of that nature would really differentiate you. But I don't know, Linn, if you have other thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And, so I've helped start a program where you can get your master's in cybersecurity and your JD. And I think that the folks who are starting to get those types of degrees and those more technical, we need more lawyers who understand the technical side. I can talk encryption and I can talk all that with forensic guys, but don't ask me to code. I don't know how to code and I can't read code. You don't really need to know how to code, but it's really helpful when you can talk to the forensic guys and the IT guys because you have that technical background. Tracey and I had to learn it. I think it's really valuable for folks to get a much deeper technical side to this for them to be more successful. The other thing that I will say is that getting as much knowledge in this area is really important. Krebs on Security, as Tracey said, I subscribe. I have a very active blog. I subscribe to Brian Krebs' blog because he probably has the best blog out there around data security. The other resources that I look at every morning is the FBI website, the US CERT website, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has scam alerts, and I provide that information to our clients so that they're up to speed on all the most recent ransomware. There's a lot. There's almost too much for resources, but those are the resources that I look at every morning to tell me kind of what happened yesterday. It used to be that you would get resources and you'd see maybe like once a week, things happened. Well, now I literally spend the first 1 to 2 hours every morning figuring out what happened yesterday in this space. So that's the other thing is if you want to get into this space, you've got to be ready to really kind of follow and watch as it's happening because it's not like other areas that something happens, once a year. We're talking every day.
Great. And would you say there are any, in terms of certifications, that would be, particularly helpful for people to get if they were going to get a certification, and how important are they?
So this is Lynn. I'm SIP certified. I think that I hope that my law students get SIP certified because I think it does just show a basic knowledge of
SIP
privacy.
I'm sorry
certified information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, CIPP.
CIPP. Certified Information Privacy Professional. But the International Association of Privacy Professionals is a great tool and a great resource for people to look at. And they have different certifications. They're expensive. And some would argue, I don't know, Tracey, how you feel about this. Some would argue that, there's a lot of privacy professionals out there that know what they're doing, that are very good and don't have their SIP certification. And a lot of academics are like, it's not necessary. I do think that people look at it, but I don't think it's the end all be all by any means.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. When I'm hiring externally, it certainly is something that I notice, but it's not something that I require.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm mindful of the time. We're at 1:32 here, so I'm just wondering if we should do the end notes, Lexi, and we've kind of created a little bit of our own path, which I guess is reflective of the reality of privacy and cybersecurity law, of improvising on the spot and being able to adjust. So we're at that time, Lexi and Emily, where I guess end notes are probably appropriate, and we've weaved some of the questions into these answers. So first of all, thank you so much to both of you, Lynn and Tracey. You guys both did a great job in describing this, and we really, really, truly appreciate the information and time that you've shared on this. And lastly, I guess in terms of questions, we've answered those. So closing notes from you, Lexi and Emily.
Great. Thank you again, both to both of our panelists for joining us today, and thank you, Dan, for guiding the conversation with really thoughtful questions. We got a lot of great responses. So again, thank you for taking the time, and thank you to everyone attending today's webinar. As Dan mentioned, we just have some housekeeping notes to wrap up with. So coming up in the Career Choice Series, if you like programs like this, we will have some programs on franchise, environmental law, how to apply for a government job, and copyright law, all coming up over the next couple weeks and months. We do another program called the Career Development Series. So in February, coming up next week, we will have Putting Social Media to Work for You for your practice and leveraging success. And then in March, we will be continuing that conversation in a different format on building your personal brand. You can connect with us on social media for the latest program updates. We're involved pretty much across the board. And then lastly, we would like to give a shout out to the people on our board like Dan who help make programs like these possible. So go to our website and check out the leadership page on ambar.org/careers to learn more. Before you go, we'd appreciate if you take our short survey. It helps us get feedback when we're planning future programs. So thank you all again and have a really great day.